Namaskaram. Welcome to another Monday, the 10th of May 2021. With Sridhar Chityala ji, and this is episode number 159 of Daily Global Insights with Sri and Sri. And in United States news, Elizabeth Warren says that Facebook Trump ban demonstrates tech are bigger than government. Your thoughts, sir?
They just proved it that they've taken under First and Second Amendment. They have taken shelter under 130, and they can pretty much do what they want to do. This government is helpless, they're just sitting by the sidelines. And
So the sorry, go ahead, sir. Finish your thought.
they're sitting by the sidelines. There's no enforcement mechanism. They can summon them to the House hearings. They can summon them to the Senate hearings. You will have a whole bunch of wiggly lawyers coming in and make statements. But at the end of the day, how do you stop enforcement?
True, sir. And whatever happened to that Section 230 strike down that Trump had initiated? Has that gone to the moribund or something like that in the Democratic dispensation?
Forgotten.
Okay. Well, that's really unfortunate. That deserved a second look. Maybe Elizabeth Warren will take that as her issue because she's also announced that she's running for president in 2024.
There you go. So I think, look, the Democrats have a problem on one side. The Republicans have a problem on the other side. The Republicans have a problem because they have targeted the Republican senators and key leaders in the Republican Party. Democrats have a problem that they are not getting their voices heard as they should in many instances. So that's the grouse of the Elizabeth Warren. So these tech platforms make choices as to how they dispense content. And all you need to do is look at the composition of some of their review boards and boards, then it will become self-evident. The worry that the Democrats have is this going to become a demon that's going to come and bite them as well? But nobody wants to bell the cat, and it is conceivable Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court sitting judge, who has initiated with three other judges a process to review, may take the lead rather than anything that is coming. There's anything that's going to come from the political side of the business.
And in a very interesting development, Democrats are worried that the Arizona audit may uncover fraud. Viewers, if you remember, a few days back we had mentioned how the Maricopa County, the largest county in Arizona, or is it Clark County? I'm not 100% sure. One of those two was going to be audited, and the entire ballot boxes was given to a firm in Florida. So what takes, what is this new development, sir?
The new development is that I'm sure that they're getting initial glimpses of information, plus probably they already have access to information by virtue of their own on-ground people. So the audit process, which is now completely under the control of the Republicans, because they are the sitting government in Arizona, at least the Senate side of the business, is going to uncover that there were specific practices. It is Maricopa County. It is not Clark County. The Maricopa County, which was hotly contested in terms of the number of seats that changed the course of the Arizona outcome. So they're worried that this may uncover. Then it will set a whole set of reactions. So it then translates into the broader agenda that the Democrats have sitting in the House for approval, and it may forthright bring forth control of the election process to the states with no federal intervention, which is the game plan of the Democrats. So who knows? It may even go to Supreme Court. There's not going to be any change in election reversals, but it will be very stark in terms of what the outcomes that comes out of it and the consequences that flow from it.
And the United States government is helping the pipeline operator after a cyber attack. We talked about this in our last hangout. So now it is true. We had mentioned about the cyber attack that took place in a Mumbai power station in October 2020. And it was, we had given the most detailed account of how many different things were identified, which one that the Chinese went after, and so on and so forth. Now it is now happening right here in the backyard of United States. Sir, what are your thoughts? Do you think there is a connection between the two?
First and foremost, I think I have tweeted on this, which is to say, when you have a liberal media and when you have a liberal government and we have a liberal governance process, um, you will find that this is effectively no longer a major kind of sensational news which impacts every human being around the country. Only thing is what percentage. Colonial Pipeline supplies 45% of the processed crude. Now, the Brent crude gets to Colonial process it, and the pipelines takes it to the retail outlets. It's the distribution mechanism, right? Imagine if President Trump was at the helm, what would be the case in the media? This is a cyber attack on the infrastructure, which affects people, and very less coverage, and not even a mention of China, as we are discussing here, as potential cause of this cyber attack. I mean, one can kind of guess it. So, what is my response to this? The response to this, is there a connection? We don't know. But what we do know is that, remember, we also had attacks on electrical grids here in the United States, right? We have had major electrical grids. There was also an attempt on a nuclear grid through this EMF, electromagnetic force, delivered through satellites or some such mechanism. So the question, therefore, that is left is how vulnerable U.S. infrastructure is and how vulnerable U.S. is to such attacks and what the consequences are, especially after COVID.
And the White House COVID chief says US is turning the corner on pandemic, and Commerce Secretary says US has a long way to go and recover from pandemic. So there are two opposing views coming out. What do you make of it, and where is the reality?
So I put this to we put this to because the reason is it's a classic example of the Biden administration's flip flop. A doesn't know what B is doing, which makes us believe, if you recall, it looks like three people are running the government, not one person running the government. Fauci comes in and says, we are turning the pandemic, we won't see, we even could have seasonal, masks, etc. So we believe once we get past, 50, 60% of the people vaccinated. Then you have the Commerce Secretary coming in and basically saying we are a long way to recover from pandemic. She's probably making a political statement to justify that COVID continues, so maybe more money needs to be pumped into the system. Whereas you're getting a medical advice, which is to say, guys, don't worry, you can get out. We believe that we are vaccinated, we have enough vaccines. And so therefore you are safe and healthy to travel outside.
And also, there is some mixed messaging as far as wearing a mask is concerned, indoor, outdoor, inside, outside. So again, this is confusion all over the place. Let's hope that this thing, they have to speak with one voice. I mean, as much as I like to critique the Democrats, I mean, we want a healthy democracy. We want two parties healthy, going at each other on issues and making sure that the other person is on the toes. What are your thoughts, sir? Why is this thing continuing to happen?
Look, I think historically, up until I would say uh, President Clinton's time, you would not find these kinds of nonsense coming from a President Clinton's administration. I think the downward slide began somewhere in Biden and in Obama administration, and then the things began to go sideways. This is inconsistent flip flops that goes on, which also says that there's probably a lot of immaturity in the administration. Whether it is that, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen in Republican administration. It just simply means that you have maybe an immature, or you have a divided administration, which is there's divided leadership within the administration. Within, we saw this in Trump as well, with the contradictions between President Trump and Dr. Fauci on the pandemic side as well. I said wear mask. I said I did not wear, don't wear mask, etc. But it doesn't augur well when you're dealing with people and people's lives.
And if we to just draw some contrasts or comparisons here, David Axelrod, who ran the campaign for Barack Obama, ran one of the most disciplined campaigns leading up to his win. Actually, he was up against tremendous odds when he was competing with Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination. I'm just kind of recapping what happened, sir. And even in the White House, I don't think Obama had mixed messaging like the way we are seeing with Biden.
The magnitude is on a different scale. We don't want to delve because, in the interest of time, I
Right.
do make a lot of comments around what happened around the Treasury side, what happened around the whole TARP program, and how the deconstruction and who should be all those kinds of things. There's lots of, but we won't go into that in the interest of time. But I think all I'm saying is that was the beginning of some of the challenges that we are continuing to see. Remember, Biden is still Obama administration number 3. Is not. That's why there is a close proximity between the two. But it seems far more divided than what we saw under Obama.
And a week's job report could slow Biden's money package. And I'm a little confused. I thought it would accelerate and he would try to double down on his positions and say that, look, we got to put more money in people's hands. The view here is a little contrarian, sir. Can you please unravel this for us?
This the view is not contrarian, but the view is a reality. The reason is, one, people are paid, so they don't want to come to work. I think we have covered this quite extensively. This information is reaching the Democrats. That's number one. Number two is that many Democrats are in what you call battleground states in their own constituencies. They are saying, okay, don't need to give so much of money to people, and we need money so we can spend money in our constituencies. There's only limited budget, so you have that second issue. And the third is, people can ask the question, how do you then, how does a federal package goes in? Well, federal package has flexibility to allocate capital to those state councils and administrations which they believe is financially weak. That is the rationale that they use to direct capital towards those constituencies. The third is that with like Markey and Manchin and so on, they're all now big cinema raising questions. Really, is this package working? If the package is working, why people are not getting back to work? That's number one. Number two is, well, how come these employment numbers are not good? Because we are supposed to have given money to both small business as well as to the individuals. So I think that's where they're losing steam. And we're not talking about small billions. We're talking about trillions here, right? So therefore, I think that's where if the job report says that we have had a great uptake, the money has worked, then they say, okay, we may need to put another trillion, especially to address this labor scorecard that Jerome Powell is talking about, whether there is a deeper penetration into the more weaker sections which have remained unemployed for a long time. Now, when you have this type of numbers, then it's going to say at the top level itself. So that means the programs are not working.
And in India-related news, Indian Navy requests 6 nuclear-powered submarines of its government, thinks that these are needed as a deterrent to China. Your thoughts, sir? How many are already there in the Indian Navy, and why 6?
I don't know why. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't know. Whether I'm competent to answer the question, which is namely to say whether it's a fleet of 12, whether it is a fleet of 15. I know that India had about 4 submarines. I may be way off the number. They initially had 2. I think initially they had some licensing arrangement with Russia. They also had an arrangement with Turkey for the final. But most of it is indigenously manufactured in India. Most part of it. Why they're asking for 6? I think they have looked at the overall needs. If you recall, we had mentioned much of the submarines of the U.S. right up. They are also due. They are old and they are due for replacement. And there's no sign of those replacements coming in. So India is saying, look, we are not going to get much support from United States, and we're not going to have the French fleet. French is also considered, very big new submarine powers. So we have augmented our air capacity. So therefore, we now need the China is considered either number 1 or number 2. Russia is in that number 1, number 2 category. So they're saying, therefore, we really now need to lift our game around the nuclear. So that's our priority. And if you recall, right through the DGIs we have given, the most recent being the six, light aircraft that can be both reconnaissance as well as with attack capabilities that can target submarines, etc. They just got that lease from United States. So I think they've got that the air part of it covered. So naturally, the next extension is submarines.
A little bit to add to this, the submarine saga. Viewers, if you have been reading PGurus articles, go and search on Scorpene, Scorpene. It's a French submarine manufacturer. And during the UPA saga, a lot of hanky-panky happened. You can get all that information. What amazes me is a certain individual who goes by a young name and continues to roam around, make nonsense, and the he can read the riot act. He can throw the book at him, and he can spend his time in jail. But anyway, that's just me saying. Let's go on to the next news. India and EU to launch parallel negotiations for trade and investment agreements. So now EU is also looking towards India, because I know that EU broke off one agreement with China, isn't it?
You broke off agreements with China. The agreement with China was around the investments. So India is viewing this as a great opportunity. If you recall, India is not only through PLI but through other programs is opening up a number of industries for investments. For example, insurance, which Europe is considered to be a world leader in the insurance business. The insurance sector is going to be diversified or diluted. So it is very smart on the part of the Indian government to say, let's keep the investments separate and let's keep the trade separate, so that investment agreements can be signed even if there are disagreements on some of the trade. Again, United States, Europe, Japan, have huge subsidies on their agricultural and some of the manufacturing products. So India has subsidies on its agricultural products. Some of the tensions can come from the subsidies in this to protect their respective domestic sectors or their respective regional sectors. They can take a very strong position. So they don't want one decision to impact the other decision. So I think it's a very strong move. I have a feeling EU could emerge as one of the big defense partners for India, because there's still some dithering going on in the United States.
And Indian exports grew 80% to 7.04 billion in the period May 1st to May 7th. I mean, this is very recent data and it's very impressive.
It is. I think they're continuing to track the microeconomic indicators. The fact that the exports continues to grow is that there's a substitution taking place. So in other words, with COVID and lockdowns, depending on the most voluminous consumptive states, it's good to see some of these exports numbers boosting up without. So otherwise, if the exports are not augmenting some of the domestic consumption, then you're going to have challenges around the contraction rather than the continued, maybe smaller growth. India's economy was projected to grow between 10 and 12.5% in fiscal year 21-22. So it remains to be seen what India will finish with, predicated on the lockdown's cost. Exports is a very positive barometer to say, look, I think India seems to be managing it reasonably well, even if it doesn't achieve the 10 to 12.5% growth.
And in global news, Secretary of State Blinken says that US stands with Ukraine against Russia. So this thing is again now heating up. I thought Russian troops were withdrawing, sir. What's the latest on this?
They have withdrawn. But the fact is that the Ukraine issue is not going to go away. So he was in the EU summit just a few days ago. So on the back of the EU summit, he also met with the Ukrainian leadership and said, we are, this is beyond President Biden to say we are with you. We are supporting you. In case Russia has any mischief in its minds, we are here.
And in U.S. Navy seizes weapons likely bound for Yemen. Where did this seizure occur?
This occurred in that upper, Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf seas. They intercepted a vessel, and it had a large cache of weaponry, and they found out that it is potentially, though because these Iran negotiations are going on, they're almost indicating that these are the Iranian weaponry going to the Houthi rebels.
And China rocket debris lands near Maldives, draws ire from NASA. Now, yesterday I had a hangout with Lieutenant General Ravi Shankar where we had talked about this in some detail. Viewers are requested to go take a look at that captivating video. It was 40 plus minutes and it was excellent stuff. There's a lot of stuff that has been happening in and around India by China, and you'll get a lot of that information. Sir, Maldives, they had a major explosion where Nasheed was injured. What do you have any status on that, sir?
Well, they believe that to be, an alleged attack. It is not confirmed. You know that there is some sprinkle of terrorist activities around that region, around the place. Pro-India, anti-India. You have these issues, and India seems to have managed that quite well. You saw the External Affairs Minister of India immediately tweet, and Mr. Nasheed being, expressing his solidarity with him, and so on. So I think this area, as you rightly point out, from Sri Lanka, Maldives, etc., we are going to see for at least next 6 to 12 months some elements of such vulnerability and such incidents until there is COVID issue is resolved and much more assertive positions are taken by the more powerful countries.
Under the guise of a pandemic, many countries are up to a lot of mischief, and this has become like a full-time occupation just to stay where you are, keep out all these rabid elements trying to poke their noses into the affairs of the countries that they consider as adversaries. Anyway, you know, sir, who I am referring to as far as India is concerned, and
Yeah.
the same entity is also trying to poke its nose in the United States affairs. By the way, nobody has given any update on what happened to the revelation that Russia had access to several secret organizations document in the United States for up to 9 months leading up to the elections in November 2020. I don't know what happened to that. We will try to find out and we'll give you an update on that also. And in other news, Putin to review Russia's military might as tensions with West Soar. Where is the friction point for West, sir? I mean, we know that they are doing some saber rattling against Ukraine. Which other area is Putin looking at?
No, I think Putin is saying I'm not reviewed my weaponry. I could be called into South China Sea. I could be called into Indian Ocean. I could be called into my own near shores. Russia is like a sleeping giant. We have mentioned in DJI programs. It was a sleeping giant which has been woken up. So the United States with NATO went right into the doorstep, which is Ukraine, and also went into the Bosporus Sea and the Baltic, and they basically even said, Black Sea is not Russian Sea. So therefore, and what Russia is saying, okay, you guys are coming to my territory. I need to see whether I am well equipped to deal with you guys. I think that's the assessment he's doing.
And a car bombing at an Afghan school in Kabul kills 55. Now, once you start seeing Taliban come to the fore, all these things become normal, isn't it?
Well, I think the journey has commenced in terms of the cleansing and in terms of the Taliban takeover. So it's, as everybody predicted, it could turn out to be a slaughterhouse.
And in COVID news, Indian COVID crisis an opportunity for left media targeting of Modi. Indian recovery rate climbs to a record 386,444 against 403,738 new cases, with net new of 13,202 on May 9, deaths at 4,092 for a total of 242,362. So with your permission, I'll put up a small graphic while you start explaining the numbers. So the graphic is up now.
Yeah, great. Look, I think that the when we did this, we had not received the May 10th. Now we are looking at the May 10th numbers. I think the number that I would like to point out is the number of discharge, number discharge. If you take a look at the number discharge is an astronomical number relative to what the media has refused to project. The number is 353,000 people have been discharged in one single day. Okay, 353,818,000 people have been discharged against 366,161 new cases, right? The total new cases. So the net increase is only 8,589. Maybe during the course of the day, the numbers may go up a little bit, but 353,000 is a very significant number, shows that there is a potential convergence between new and people getting discharged and the net addition. And again, when you look at these numbers, the number of deaths totally is around 246,000. Then when you look at the more important data is right at the top. The more important data is 170 million people have been vaccinated. And in any given day, we have seen a number up to 2 million. Again, this may not have been updated. You have 689,000 people vaccinated on the previous day. 303 million samples, I just want to be very clear, it's not people, 303 million samples have been tested. Now, 303 million, whether it translates to how many million people, we don't know, but the number is 170 million. On an Indian population of 1.3 billion, plus or minus, if you take the people to be vaccinated to be around 1 billion or 1.1 billion, India is moving towards that 20% number, 20 to 25% number, 20% to be near. I think this 20 to 25% number is the threshold, as we saw in the United States, for COVID to flip the other way. So which means there's sufficient number of vaccinated people getting into the system. There's another number, which is namely people are saying, look, don't forget the fact that we have had a total case of 22 million people who have also had COVID. They naturally become buoyant as having antibodies to fight it once they get back into the system. So the number is quite encouraging between vaccinated and those who acquired this and getting back into the system. This is what made the difference in the United States. There's only two countries where you can put on a relative scale comparative basis. That's United States and India, potentially Brazil. But we haven't studied Brazil very closely in terms of the micro-analysis of the numbers the way we have done India and United States. So problems exist on oxygen. The problems exist on hospital beds. The problems exist on hospitalizations. All those problems exist. But the fact is that there is still a very, what you call, silver lining in this dark cloud that India is confronting.
And globally, countries continue to battle COVID with shutdown and vaccine shortage. And moving on to markets finished Friday with a Dow up 200 points. Inflation continues to be the big challenge. What do you see for markets this week, sir?
This week, people are looking at the first number that they're looking at is inflation. What's the situation? And the inflation is slowly rising. I think that's the first number that they're looking at. Second, they're continuing to. This is on the back of the employment report. The second they're looking at is, has this had any impact in the earnings of some of the companies in the previous quarter? If they can begin to see some headwinds in the earnings, then you're going to see the challenges in markets. Having said that, we have given the charts of all the three indices. They're well above the targeted numbers for 2021.
And with that, we bring today's episode to a close. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe to our channel. Do join membership of our channel. And as always, Sridharji, it's a pleasure to have you on the channel. We'll be back tomorrow bright and early. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week.